Xingke is a rank 4 Annihilator pilot. Let's get to the abilities. So first he has hold on just a little longer. Every 5 seconds increases this unit's action speed by 1.08 times for 60 seconds and its short range accuracy rate by 20% while lowering its max HP by 3%. That's a lot. Then it has an evasion rate, which increases the evasion rate of this unit by 35% for 60 seconds every 10 seconds. Now, when you go up to Xinkge, the first thing you might notice is that he's got pretty balanced attack stats, high short range and long range attack, and also, decent health. I wouldn't say it's the best, but decent, and same with the defense. Now, in the first year anniversary boost, they will get his attack power, I believe, to 1,000, but that's not till 1.5-year anniversary, if this game lasts that long. I know some people speculate it may not, but if it does, he will be much stronger by then. Now, most of his effects, if you notice, are based on short range, not long range. So even though he is good with a Nightmare frame with a long range weapon, his effects relate to him using a melee weapon, which is fine because that's what he did in the TV show for the most part, although there were scenes where he did use the cannon ability, or I guess the weapon, of the Shen Hu. And of course, he is made to go with the Shen Hu, as we'll get to later on in this video. The thing about this Xingke is that he's okay. He's not the best attacker in the game, and if you don't have, let's say, Cornelia or Bismarck, I don't know if it's worth using him as your replacement. One of the problems with this Xinkge is that while he does improve his evasion rate, and he also improves his ability to attack in short range combat, he doesn't do much for everyone else like Cornelia does, or say Toto. And while Bismarck does not, when you place Bismarck on the battlefield, you're doing so with the idea that he'll take out anyone else out there. With Xinkge, will he do the same thing? I guess so, but his effects are more focused on surviving, not so much boosting his attack power, which is kind of frustrating. Now, he does increase action speed and accuracy, which is great, but the attack power boost would be better, or at least boosting the attack power of other members of the Chinese Federation, or maybe eventually the Black Knights. But instead, it's just very based around him, and if it's going to be based around him, I would expect a little more than that. I think right now he's fine, but in the future, not so much. And the fact that they have to keep boosting him every single time just kind of tells you about the situation with the character, in the fact that they released him too early into the game, because obviously the Chinese Federation stuff doesn't happen until R2. I believe the story, though, is a prequel to the events of R2, so that's why they can get away with it, kind of like the Knights of the Round event. By the way, I should also mention that in the first year anniversary boost, they also fixed some of his effects as well. So it's not just his attack stats and defense, it's also his effects as well. So again, if you do get this character, just know they will keep improving him throughout the years, just because unfortunately the game goes through a lot of power creep. Overall, he's not a bad pilot, but there's just better options available to you, both, let's say, rank 3 Annihilators or rank 4 Annihilators. I feel like the things this guy brings to the table are not good enough. I would have, again, preferred maybe buffing his own attack power, or everyone in the Chinese Federation, or just something else that makes him more impactful on the battlefield. I feel like he's basically designed to do 1-on-1 to 1-on-3 battles with the Shen Hu, and that's kind of it. And he is hard to kill while also lowering his health every time he uses his ability, so that could be an issue. And I understand he's doing that because it's part of the show canon, because he was sick in the series and he was bleeding from his mouth quite often. However, he didn't actually die in the battle, he died later on at the end of the series, which we never actually see on screen, but it is heavily implied in Resurrection. Or it's not saying heavily implied, it's told to you in Resurrection, and it's implied in the original anime. Let's move on now to Zhou. Okay, Zhou is a rank 3 strategy type pilot. Let's get to her abilities. So first, she has a pilot power up high. Upon deployment, increases the attack power of all deployed Chinese Federation ally units and a single ally unit within range, excluding this one, by 35% for 26.2 seconds. Second ability is the same, except it increases the defense of all deployed Chinese Federation ally units and a single ally unit within range, excluding this one, by 35% for 26.2 seconds. there's going to be other pilots in the game that do something similar, where they're just simply an attack/defense boost for their sub-faction. I believe Zhou is the first example of this. Now, one thing I do like about her is that she has actually pretty high long-range attack at 585.6%, which for most strategy type pilots is actually pretty solid. The cost is kind of high, relatively speaking. Health is fine, defense is okay. Again, you're not expecting high durability for a strategy type pilot, which is why I think it's fine that it's not that great. Now, in terms of her effects, the one thing I don't like about them is that they don't boost herself. So if you deploy her, she won't boost her own defense and attack power. And yes, I understand that strategy type pilots are not meant to remain on the battlefield for long term anyways, but they did give her pretty high attack power, almost implying that maybe she should be on the battlefield fighting, but she doesn't boost her own attack power or defense, which kind of sucks. So at least she boosts other people's defense and attack power, and because she will boost someone who's not part of the Chinese Federation, which is a pilot in range, you can use her, for example, in the Nightmare Frame boss battle, because you can boost the pilot by, 35%? Yeah, 35% during that battle to help kill the boss faster. So she might end up being one of those utility pilots used in very niche situations, just like in the Nightmare Frame boss battle. The problem with her effects is not the fact they don't buff her, which is annoying, but the Chinese Federation sub-faction is currently 5 members, and this is 1.5 years into the game. Actually, it's more than that now, which means there's not a lot of usability for this character outside of niche situations like I mentioned earlier. Now sure, there are event factions that have certain abilities based on the event, which obviously has less members than a Chinese Federation faction. However, some of those effects could be based on a character, not based on the faction itself, giving it more longevity. The problem with Zhou is that she's only really helpful to the Chinese Federation sub-faction, and like I said, 5 members only, so that's a problem. And you have to consider the fact that, well, even though she could be good in that faction, there's not many members of it, and therefore, is it worth investing into this character? I'd say probably not. So overall, a good pilot with decent effects, but unfortunately is held back by the fact that she's mostly useful in the Chinese Federation sub-faction, which is a shame. Now let's move on to Tianzi. Tianzi is a rank 4 healer pilot with relatively low health and defense, but they will boost that in the first year anniversary update, which is pretty good. They're also going to boost her long range attack to 1100. And before you get excited, just keep in mind this comes after we get better healers in the game, so they're only doing that to compete with other characters. So that might seem overwhelming right now, but it won't be when it happens. Now let's get back to the abilities. So first we have I'm scared, but I must act. Jeez, I can't read. I'm scared, but I must act. 3 seconds after deployment and every 20 seconds thereafter increases the max health of all ally units within range by 35% for 20 seconds. Also increases healing to this unit by 1. Okay. And then we have lowers the deployment cost of the Chinese Federation pilots by 5. Now, the problem with this Tianzi, and there's unfortunately quite a lot, she doesn't have any effects that either prevent damage or heal, in addition to the fact that she is a healer. Now, as you guys know, I'm kind of a stickler about this, where I prefer the pilots that are healers to have a healing effect and an ability to prevent damage. The only pilot I give a pass to is Millie, because the cost reduction and attack buff are good enough to compensate for the fact that she doesn't have either one of those. But besides that, Millie, I generally don't give a pass to any other healers in the game, and this Tianzi is no different, because increasing the max health of pilots is great, but the problem with that is that it won't prevent them from dying any faster. I mean, yeah, you might increase it by a certain percentage, but if they get one shot by a boss, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. Now, in the first year anniversary boost, I believe, or maybe it's a 1.5, I kind of get those confused. But anyways, in one of those, she'll be able to increase the Chinese Federation faction max health further by a significant margin, which is fine. But as I said, when it comes to Zhou, that's still very limited to a sub-faction. So while that is really good, it again limits her ability, which is why even though I have Tianzi on both my accounts, I never use her for these reasons. And the same could be said about her ability to reduce the deployment cost of all members of the Chinese Federation faction. Again, it's not a bad ability, but the sub faction only has 3 members right now, and it'll have 5 later on. We might be getting a 6th one in the next event in the Japanese side, I don't know, but the point is, you're looking at 5 members. Now at least they make it 16 after the 1.5 anniversary boost, which again sounds really good, but keep in mind, by that point in the game, we already have better cost reducers for other factions, and that's why they had to give it 16 over 5. So keep in mind those buffs are to compensate for the game being way better than when the character first came out. Now one thing I really like about this character is that she has balanced attack stats for melee and long range, which means she can work as both a ground and a range healer. This is especially apparent when she gets the first year or is it 1.5 anniversary boost. Again, I keep forgetting which one it was, but the point is she is good with both nightmare frame types, which will help in certain types of maps. Overall, as a rank 4 healer, I'm quite disappointed. I think they could have done a lot more with her, and compared to other healers we have in the game, including Nagisa, who's a rank 3 pilot, she is infinitely worse than her, which is kinda sad. Especially when you consider the fact that I really like the character from the anime, but whatever, it is what it is. You'll have to wait for her night version that comes out much later on that has the ability to increase your cost upon deployment. That Tianzi is very good, but we did get her at the cost of not getting Cecile in the red dress, so from that point of view, I'll never forgive these guys. But jokes aside though, this Tianzi, she's kinda mid. Now let's talk about that new nightmare frame you can get for free, by the way, which is the Shen Hu. Okay, here's the store. Let's see what they're giving away here. So we have short range items, enhancement items. That's good. You can use it for the Shen Hu. Okay, that's pretty standard. A generic core luminous, that makes sense for the Shen Hu, and nightmare frame enhancement crystals. Overall, this is actually pretty good compared to most stores for events. Although I wish we got scout tickets, but I guess that ship has long sailed. Now to the Shen Hu itself. It is a nightmare frame with float unit, which is pretty good. It costs 11, which is kind of high. It's got 300 attack, which by the way is still one of the highest of any nightmare frame in the game with a melee weapon. I know we already have the Percival and the Galahad who also have 300 attack power, but I believe there's only 4 in the game still that have 300 melee attack, even now after what, 1.5 years into the game, which is kind of crazy. I know that the Albion and probably the Satan 8 elements will surpass that if they have melee weapons. Anyways, this nightmare frame, like I said, 300 attack power, it's short range, so it's melee only. It only attacks one space ahead, which I don't like too much, but what is cool is that it hits 2 enemies within range, and the special deals 3.75 times your attack power to 3 enemies in range. If you have Xinkge, I believe it's 4 times your attack power to 3 enemies in range, which is pretty good. And of course, if you combine it with Xinkge, it's a very deadly combination because Xinkge increases action speed and also accuracy, so this nightmare frame will kill a lot of enemies. What I like about this nightmare frame is that 1, it's free, which is always nice, but it also has 300 attack power and it also attacks very quickly, including 2 enemies in range, which is great if you don't have the Lancelot, because I think when it comes to melee weapons that attack quickly and attack multiple enemies at one time, this is currently the best nightmare frame in the game that does that. And what I mean by that is that you'll notice when you use the Shen Hu, your nightmare frame skill gauge is going to fill up quickly because of the rate at which this thing attacks, which is fantastic. And that's how they compensate for the fact that the actual base range and special range is only 1 spot ahead, because this nightmare frame does attack very quickly, which in certain cases is very useful. And it also combos well with many pilots, including the C2 Lazy Witch, the rank 3 one, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about. So it's very good in those situations. When it first came out, I didn't think much of it, but when I started using it, I was very impressed by the nightmare frame. Like I said before, when better ones come out, it will get power crept, specifically because it doesn't have fixed damage, unlike the Gurren Mark II, the Sagetsu, the Galahad, and so forth. So not having fixed damage is definitely something that will impact this nightmare frame going forward. Now in the first year anniversary update, they will give it a range weapon, which is horrible. It's like a weaker version version of the Gwain, specifically the fact that you have to wait for it to charge. I believe the damage is actually better than the Gwain's, but again, you have to wait for it to charge when you fire the weapon, which isn't the worst thing, but keep in mind, you have to work even harder to take out certain enemies. It's actually quite frustrating that even if you level up the ranged weapon, it won't make the melee weapon any higher than 300 attack power, which again shouldn't be a big deal because it doesn't deal fixed damage, which is one of my biggest frustrations with this nightmare frame. Overall, for a free nightmare frame, you could do a lot worse, and therefore I think it's worth at the very least acquiring this nightmare frame and leveling it up. Now, in terms of this banner, in case it wasn't obvious by my tone and my negativity towards all the characters, this is by far one of the easiest skips you could ever do in the game's history. All these pilots are unlimited, which means they will join the main banner, and unfortunately, you'll summon them many times when you don't want to, which is super frustrating. There's going to be better events coming up, like Christmas and New Year's, and better chapter banners as well, including the Gwain and the Lancelot flight enabled version, which will be coming out, I believe, not this one, but maybe the next one after that. The point is, it's not worth it. Do not waste your Sakuradite on this banner. If you get nothing else from this video, that's the biggest takeaway here. Do not summon from this banner, save your Sakuradite. If this is your first banner in Kogia's Lost Stories, meaning you just started the game for the first time, check out my video right here on my complete beginner's guide for the game. And just for fun, here's my video on Todo, Nagisa, and Asahina. The banner might have ended, but they are unlimited characters which you will be summoning sometime in the future. Now go check out the videos right now.